everyone here knows how various state governments in this country have vied with one another to provide sweeter and even sweeter deals. But let me hasten to add that this is not an infection peculiar to multinational companies. Corporate India, by and large, has benefited immensely from tax giveaways. Every year, the finance minister, union finance minister, notes in his budget the revenue foregone by the government on account of tax concessions. And last year's budget noted that 88,000 crores was the revenue foregone in 1 year by the central government as a result of various concessions, and only on direct taxes, that is. If we take the other taxes, excise, customs, and personal taxes too, the scorecard reads this: total tax foregone 510,000 crore, that's about $100 billion, and the revenue collected by the government, tax revenue, 800,000 crore, $160 billion. In addition, state governments too are much the poorer because they make similar tax sacrifices. I'm saying this because this is the kind of behavior that this new concept, the corporate global citizenship, wouldn't encourage. These incentives provide one-off advantage to the companies in question, but they actually shortchange the government treasury. Tax breaks leave governments with far less cash than they need to spend on infrastructure and education, which, by the way, in the long term can preserve the competitiveness of industry. If you ask me what best the companies can do is, please don't ask for these tax concessions. The money can be used by the government to lift people out of poverty. But can we expect companies to give up this tax exemption seeking behavior? Let us look at other issues and challenges. Multinationals come to set up factories or outsource manufacturing in emerging markets typically because wages are low, much lower than in their home countries. So they end up setting up what are derisively called sweatshops. It's true that wages here would still be higher than what workers get elsewhere in the country, but would it make business sense for these multinationals to pay wages closer to their Western levels, home levels? Would these firms remain globally competitive if they do? Let me take two other concerns: sustainability and response to climate change. Some of the most profitable multinationals in the world are mining companies, and in this I shall club the petroleum companies. Net profit margins are in the high double digits, exceeding 50% in many cases. And we have something called sustainable mining at all. We made some dramatic correction with forest produce, making logging companies responsible for compensatory forestation. But I wonder whether it's possible in mining. Nature doesn't replenish these things in a hurry. What about response to climate change? Transportation is a major contributor to emission of greenhouse gases and pollution, especially in India. And a serious response here would be to encourage public transportation and discourage the proliferation of personal transportation, especially something the monsters called SUVs. But how would our auto companies that are largely in the personal transportation space respond to this challenge? What kind of prescription are we going to make out for them? Lastly, philanthropy is a hobby I dare say only the wealthy can indulge in. Of course, it requires the right attitude, and for not every rich person is a philanthropist. So only profitable companies can take on the kind of social responsibilities that are being advocated here. Yet not for a moment am I suggesting that companies cannot be responsible citizens and yet be profitable. I go back to that famous economist, Adam Smith, and his treatise on the wealth of nations, where he said businessmen working with an enlightened self-interest will make a profit and yet do best for his customers. In his famous example, he noted a butcher doesn't supply meat based on good-hearted intentions, but because he profits by selling meat. If the meat he sells is poor, he will not have repeat customers and thus no profit. Therefore, it's in the butcher's interest to sell good meat at a price that customers are willing to pay.